We got breaking news here, actually. First thing on this Wednesday morning. It's our Tuesday recap pod, but it is also trade time. Da 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 da. Breaking news from Sham Charania. That's my breaking news song. The Milwaukee Bucks are trading Khris Middleton and AJ Johnson, plus a pick swap. I don't care. To the Washington Wizards for Kyle Kuzma, Patrick Baldwin Jr., and second round draft compensation. Again, I don't care. I don't care about the picks. Yes, it's all important as you're trying to figure out what teams are doing what going forward. But from a fantasy standpoint, let's be honest. We got to pare down the kind of crap that we're sifting, that we're processing, and just look at the main stuff. And right here, the main stuff is that Khris Middleton and Kyle Kuzma got swapped. Let's worry about the core stuff. On the Kyle Kuzma side, he goes to a team where he gets to play for something, which he hasn't had since the Lakers. Oh, the Russ deal. The Russ deal. And, you know, there was a stretch in there where Kuzma sort of convinced himself that he'd be okay playing for a crap dink team. And that ran out this year, basically. You know, that first year in Washington, he was taking 14 shots. They were like halfway competitive that year. And then they went hard into the tank, and it was all Kuzma all the time. And he put up big numbers, you know, 21-7, 22-6, 4 assists, 2 3-pointers, bad defensive stats, and terrible efficiency. That stuff was never going anywhere, which made him kind of a difficult player to figure out on the 9-cat side. But he always had a punt avenue to value, and he was always a very solid points league guy. And then this year, you just had this sort of disinterested, sort of banged up, but like just not really willing to play through anything Kuz, who averaged 15-6, which again, under normal circumstances wouldn't sound so bad, but you're shooting 42% from the field and 60 at the free throw line with over 2 turnovers and only 0.8 combined defensive stats per game. You want the clearest indicator that he didn't care anymore? He was averaging a career low in blocks, which again, not like his forte or anything, but 0.2. He just wasn't interested in competing, particularly on defense. Now, he started to do more over the last, call it 2 weeks, where it looked like perhaps he was trying to convince some other teams that he was still worth taking a shot on. Well, whatever it was, he convinced one team he was still worth taking a shot on, and now he goes to Milwaukee. I would assume that the Bucks brought him in to start. Like, we can't know for certain until he gets acclimated and all that good stuff. But like, just looking at, forget Milwaukee's most recent ball game, which was a throwaway game on Monday. They rested everybody. Prior to that, I think they played on Saturday, question mark? Was it Saturday or was it all the way back on Friday? Might have been all the way back on Friday. I think they got blown out by the Spurs in that game, if I'm remembering right. Now, in that one, the Bucks started Dame and Giannis, obviously, Brook Lopez, obviously, Taurean Prince, and Andre Jackson Jr. And they brought Middleton off the bench. My best guess is that Andre Jackson Jr. gets punted and Prince stays in the starting 5. But even if they flip-flop that, it doesn't really matter. They could also move Gary Trent into the starting 5 if they wanted to. There are some options. But the easy thing is to say, look, Kuzma's going to come in, and they're probably going to play him 30 minutes. In 30 minutes, Kuzma probably gets around the same amount of opportunity as he got in more like, maybe that last year with the Lakers. Not the championship season, but the one after that. Remember, Lakers sort of kept it together. They ran it back, and they were really, really good until AD got hurt. And then they blew the whole thing up. And that last year in LA, Kuzma played about 29 minutes a ball game, and he averaged 13-6. There's a hope that his efficiency gets better playing alongside Giannis and Dame. Here's the thing. Kuz has played alongside LeBron and AD, and he still shot 44% from the field. I think that's just who he is. There's also the possibility that over a 2-month sort of limited sample size thing going on here, he could just get hot for a little bit, and maybe he shoots 46 or 47%. That'd be great. And he did that last year with the Wizards, but also that's the high water mark. And he shot 77% at the free throw line last year, also the high water mark. So maybe we get lucky and he sits right near his high water mark. But the problem, again, is that he's the third fiddle. Dame is going to get his 20 shots. Giannis is going to get his 20 shots. I'm rounding, by the way. But if you're looking at like what else happened with this team, Bobby Portis usually gets a handful. Middleton got a handful. Kuzma's not just going to drop into 15 or 16 shots. That's a lot to get unless the Bucks clear some other stuff out. But we have to handicap this trade as the Bucks are currently constructed. And so right now, even if Kuzma gets a little, like, I don't think he's going to be at 42% from the field and 60 at the foul line. I think this year was obviously on its way to being a sort of disinterested low. Yeah, he probably bounces back to that 45 range and, low 70s at the free throw line, but he's going to need a lot of usage to get to some kind of value. And I don't see it happening. I could see him getting to basically what he was doing this year anyway, which is 15 and 6. And maybe the rebounds even go up from 6 a little bit. Although, again, Giannis rebounds a lot. To me, 15 and 6 feels like a goal for him. And if it's on slightly better percentages, still doesn't really get you there. Points leagues, I'd say maybe. Category leagues, I'd say no. Before we talk about Khris Middleton, let's talk about Bet Online. The biggest betting weekend of the year is coming up. Super Sunday, which means more updated odds and props. Bet Online this year has hundreds of prop bets for you to sift through. Gatorade color, national anthem length, you name it, they've got it. They've got MVP odds, exclusive in-game live opportunities that you can get down on during the Super Bowl on Sunday. And when you roll it all together, BetOnline is obviously your ultimate game day companion. It's also helpful that they're the world's most trusted betting platform. That's a good thing, too. So whether you're a first-timer or a seasoned vet, get down to BetOnline. Make game day just a little bit more fun and count a little bit more. BetOnline. The game starts here. Thank you to their continued partnership here at Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. They are the reason that we can do what we do. Also, by the way, before we get to Middleton, take a moment to say hello. Hi, welcome to the program. I'm Dan Besbris. It's Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm on Twitter. Find me there immediately, especially now running up to the trade deadline. This is mandatory. DANBESBRIS. Old Man Squad is the handle over at Blue Sky. Hit that like button. And if you made it to this point in the video, I think you're good enough to subscribe to what we're doing over here, right? That's reasonable. If you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, please take a second to drop that 5-star review. And please make sure to bookmark our trade deadline live show that's coming up first thing on Thursday morning, 7 o'clock Pacific time. I am waking up, rolling out of bed, kicking my wife out of the room, putting this board behind me, and we're starting a show, and we're just rolling all the way through the deadline. It's going to be a frickin' wingding. And also, by the way, if you're wondering who's going to be on that show besides just my dumb face, it's going to be my good friend David Williams, Adam King. We're a 3-man hosting crew because of time issues. So David Williams is going to be with us for the first half, Adam King the second half of the show. Noah Rubin, Daniel McKee, Dan Palio, Josh Millman, Dan Titus, Scott Keller, Adam Stock, Mike Barner, Alex Rickling, Steve St. Pierre. All of those guest analysts will be coming on for some stretch of time with us on our trade deadline show tomorrow. Let's get back to the Khris Middleton side. Now, the prevailing thought, and probably the correct one, is that the Wizards are going to try to move him again. Now, I would say it's sort of like an easier said than done sort of thing in that we don't know. Like, are the Wizards going to be comfortable just getting sort of crap for Middleton? Because now they have this guy, and they've got a day to move him. And teams always want to get sort of the best possible stuff. Middleton has a $34 million player option next year, and he doesn't look particularly healthy. He's shooting the ball well. The efficiency's been pretty good. But he's also been picking on second units of late, and I don't know that his body can handle a full complement of minutes, like normal starters level stuff. So what team is going to give up draft capital and take on a dude who's almost definitely going to exercise his $34 million player option next year. Because if Khris Middleton hits free agency, he ain't getting $34 million right now. So it's one of those things where I think that there's a 50-50 shot that Middleton stays on the Wizards and is a prime shutdown candidate down the stretch, and then becomes actually a much more valuable trade chip next year when he's on an expiring deal. Everybody loves an expiring deal because there's no commitment. He's good enough to take a shot on an expiring, but there's no like, oh no, what if, Middleton's body breaks down again? We don't want to be on the hook for $35 million of dead weight next season. Again, I'm not saying that either one of those is definitely going to happen. I just want to put it out into the world because everybody on Twitter is like, Dan, Khris Middleton, there's no way he's staying put. I would beg to differ. I think there is some probability, whether you think it's 10% or 50%, that the Wizards are like, we're not going to get much for him right now because nobody wants to give up much for a guy who's we might owe the rest of this season and next year. If they just squat on him for a few months, into the offseason even, he becomes a much more valuable trade chip. Probably not the offseason. Probably you'd think like middle of next year. Because someone will want to take a shot at, Middleton coming off the bench and being their bench gunner for half a year, as opposed to a year and a half. That's a lot of commitment to a guy that cannot stay healthy and hasn't for 3 years in a row. Now, he could get moved. It's quite possible that a team is just like, yeah, screw it, like we got nothing to lose. But again, I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware, sometimes teams sit on a dude. If the Wizards sit on Middleton, you're going to see him probably play 25, 27, somewhere in that neck of the woods minutes, like 1 out of every 2 or 3 ball games. He will most likely not be rosterable in head-to-head because of missed games. He will, I think, be rosterable in Roto if he stays put, because when he gets into the lineup, it's going to be like Kuzma, it's going to be like Brogdon, where they're going to get 20-some-odd minutes, and they're just going to be able to do whatever the hell they want. So like in Milwaukee, Middleton's playing 24 minutes a game. He's getting 9 or 10 shots. If he played 24, 25 minutes a game in Washington, that's probably going to be 12 to 15 shots a game. And that would be more than enough for him to post fantasy value. So on the Roto side, I'm actually kind of happy with the way this worked out for Middleton. For head-to-head, it's a train wreck. And again, it might completely shift in the next 24 hours. And if that does happen, then we'll talk about it on our trade deadline show. So that's where I'm at with this trade. And that gives us an opportunity now to pivot to the actual card from yesterday. Or this isn't yesterday. Sorry, let's flip that. We were looking at the Bucks' last box score, or I was. Now you were for a moment. Dallas in Philadelphia. Dallas played him tough. Daniel Gafford left this ballgame at the very, very end dealing with a little shoulder thing. Hopefully that's not a big deal. If it is a big deal, that would probably slide Anthony Davis back to the 5 after all the talk of him being the 4. I wouldn't do anything with this information until we have a little bit more on it. In the meantime, Kyrie Irving is a start. There was no PJ Washington in this one, so Klay Thompson had a better shot at minutes. Kessler Edwards played 23. Najee Marshall got a whole bunch of shots up. Max Christie was great in his Mavs debut, which should surprise no one because he was turning into a really, really good asset for the Lakers. Don't make any moves off of this ball game is sort of the short version because there was no Anthony Davis, and Christie was there, and Caleb Martin, who they just traded for, was also not there. So they're about to add 2 more guys that are probably going to pick up decent minutes, and that's going to gunk up whatever we thought we saw in this ball game. Philly's side was a little bit more interesting. They got a win, which people are just like, when are the Sixers going to shut it down? They're not going to shut it down, guys. The Bulls are going into tank mode, and the Sixers are a game back of taking that 10 seed. And you know damn well that if Philly feels like they can get into a play-in, they're going to do it. There's no point in tanking for the Sixers. They want to see what they can do in the playoffs if they could get Embiid and Paul George healthy at the same time. It's a big if, mind you. Sixers have Paul George out. They have Quentin Grimes on the way. And yes, I know Embiid is going to sit out the back-to-back here, so obviously, for that game, Yabusele and Kelly Oubre are very easy decisions. I think you guys probably want my take on what this team looks like when Embiid is playing. and Grimes shows up, and then we'll sort of reassess again when Paul George comes back. Embiid and Maxey, obviously, those guys are starts. Oubre played enough minutes here where I think he's probably startable until Paul George comes back. That's even with Embiid, because the usage is a lot lower. It makes him more borderline. I'll give you that. On Oubre, he's now kind of borderline, but I think it's just enough to probably keep him in lineups. Yabusele, which is weird because he had the better ball game here, so I know you guys are going to be wondering why the hell I'm more negative on Gershon, is he had 19, 8, and 4. That looks great on paper, but it took him a 7 of 8 shooting game with a perfect 5 for 5 at the free throw line to get there. If that's even a 5 for 8 instead of 7 of 8, and a 4 for 5 at the foul line instead of a perfect 5 for 5, you take away 5 points, you got 14, 8, and 4. Still decent, but you're sort of like, well, I would start him because of the minutes. If Yabusele is going to get 35 minutes, he's still a yes for me. And when I say start him, I'm talking about like against the games cap, whatever. Because in this iteration, there was no Eric Gordon, by the way, in this ballgame either. And yes, Grimes could show up, but it feels like the players that are more at risk there would be, like Justin Edwards playing 38 minutes or Ricky Council getting 20 off the bench. Those guys probably lose out to Grimes before Yabusele and Kelly Oubre do. So right now, you're playing Maxey, you're playing Embiid, you're playing Yabusele, you're playing Oubre, and let's just see how the next game or two goes. Once Paul George comes back, I think all of those guys fall off the start boat, and then it's just the 3 main dudes. Houston was down a few players in this ballgame. Freddie VanVleet is out for a couple of weeks. Şengün was back, however. Tari Eason was out because this was a back-to-back, so he was resting. So you got a lot of Şengün, a 2020 game that somehow was a bad fantasy night because of the percentages and no defensive stats. And, I mean, listen, I think we're far enough into the season that we can probably say what I said during draft season and kind of double down on it. Şengün's a punt free throw guy. He was drafted at like 20, 25 in a lot of leagues, and he's ranked number 69, largely because of the foul shooting. And it's that thing where, like, you don't have to, I've said this pretty much throughout the year, you don't have to punt free throws to draft Şengün. But if you are, he's a 3rd rounder. And if you're not, he's a 6th rounder. It's just harder. You can still win with him, taking him in the 3rd round, because he does a lot of things well. But he certainly wouldn't have been the best pick for you at that spot if you're not punting free throws. There was a sort of a little nothing wiener trade that just went down while we were talking. I'll throw it up on the screen. It's not going to matter after we get through this one. Jaden Springer and a 20-30 second rounder. Yeah, that is a nonsense trade. Looking back at Houston here a little bit longer. Dylan Brooks, like we talked about all the different 5-game week guys you could play, and they're pretty much all in that mix. Reed Shepherd, Cam Whitmore, Jayshawn Tate, like probably not Aaron Holiday. No longer Steven Adams now that Şengün is back. If you're thinking about just games cap stuff, obviously Amen Thompson is a go. Şengün is a go. If Jalen Green fits your team build, he would be the 3rd one. And then Tari Eason when he comes back. That's as far as you go with the Rockets, who lost this game, by the way, in incredible fashion. I wonder if am I allowed to play the Underdog tweet that they sent out last night on the show here? I've never done this, but I kind of want to. Let's see if it works. We're going to share this tweet from Underdog, which is a clip of the end of the Rockets-Nets game. And let's see if this works. So just watch. I don't know if audio is going to pump through or not. But this is incredible. Watch this video. I think you do get audio.
Finds Johnson a deep 3.
All right, 97-96 now. Watch this. Watch this. Inbound, Nolan, D'Lo, boom. How crazy is that? I don't know, by the way, if that's going to ruin whether or not that this video can be monetized, but we threw it in there, and Now I'm going to pay the ultimate price. That was probably stupid. I'm going to regret that. Maybe we'll just turn advertising off on this video, and that way we won't have to worry about it. As far as the Nets go, insane way to win a ball game. That one, I loved it. There are too many moving pieces right now with Brooklyn. Like to go games cap style. We've talked about Day'Ron Sharpe as a possible deadline stash guy, which continues to be interesting if Nick Claxton gets moved. D'Lo, you're starting when he's in there. Claxton, you're starting when he's in there. Cam Thomas at some point will be back. Cam Johnson probably gets traded. And then you've just got everybody trading off. Like Keon Johnson had a better ball game here. Zaire Williams was coming off a really good one. This one was not quite so good. To me, it's just too much. It's too many moving pieces. So don't overextend yourself and just keep going. The New York Knicks with Precious Achiuwa taking over for Anunoby. Precious is definitely a guy you want to stream right now while he's in there for OG, so that's a pretty easy one. For Toronto, Jakob Poeltl left with a hip pointer early in the third quarter. I picked up Kelly Olynyk everywhere. Literally everywhere. I know it's deadline week, and I know that moves are at a premium right now. I don't care. If Jakob Poeltl has to miss a few ball games, I'm going to stream the crap out of Olynyk because he can go so crazy in starters minutes, and I don't want to miss it. RJ Barrett dealing with concussion stuff, and it sounds like it was kind of a bad one. So you might be able to get a little bit of a Grady Dick stream going, but only 8 shots here in a full ball game doesn't augur well for him. I would think about Grady Dick. I think that's a low value one. Same with Ochai Agbaji. I think we can do better. But Olynyk, if he gets to fill in for Poeltl, I don't think that you could really do better. Boston and Cleveland was completely devoid of fantasy notes. Other than Al Horford having a really nice game, like there was literally nothing here. Nothing. Nothing, I say. Let's keep going. Miami lost at Chicago, which is extremely disappointing because the Bulls are supposed to be going into tank mode. As far as the Heat is concerned, Terry Rozier went back to being bad, so that was predictable. Khalil Ware still rocking. Nikola Jovic still rocking. Tyler Hero has slowed considerably of late. I know 23, 8, and 9. It's weird to say he's slowed, but the efficiency is finally beginning to level out. And then Adebayo, I mean, he had a few good ball games there and then fell right back off a cliff. Bam is number 64. Did Hero fall? He's still inside the top 40, but he's been trending kind of the wrong way. And I wonder if once this Butler stuff shakes out, then we'll get a better feel for it. But this was kind of fun. First of all, Ayo Dosunmu, 29 minutes. He was great. 21 points, 2 boards, 9 assists, a steal block, couple of 3-pointers. You guys know I think Ayo belongs on every roster the rest of the way. Matas Buzelis, 24 points on a perfect 10 out of 10 shooting. We've had a lot of folks on this show lately talk about how he's one of their deadline stash guys. I'm going to be a little bit of a temper your expectations dude, where like obviously he's not going to shoot 10 for 10. If he goes 5 for 10, you're talking about basically a 12-3 and a couple of blocks game. I like the blocks, though. I'm still not a full Buzelis believer yet. I think we got to clear a few things out of the way here to where, there's just got to be a little bit more usage. There's got to be a little more rebounding. If it's just points and threes and you're hoping for blocks, that's not quite enough to float it, but it's not far. It's not far. So I'm not using a move on him yet, but it's take note time. Lonzo was bad in this one, but he played 29 minutes. So to me, he still belongs on every roster, and you just sort of accept the fact that every once in a while he's not going to have a great ball game, because that's what happens to guys that are not superstars. Every once in a while, they don't have a great game. Lakers, with no Max Christie, no Anthony Davis, and Luka still out, just destroyed the Clippers. Executed perfectly. I mean, this was one of those crazy games where, like, everything the Lakers did was right. And you obviously got big games out of LeBron and Austin Reeves, which is going to be the case until Luka shows up. And then Rui is, and this is 2 games in a row now for Rui, he's the third guy if you want to play a third guy on the Lakers. And then you have a whole bunch of other dudes that are all going to log like a decent chunk of minutes for their roles. From a roles standpoint, Connect, Hayes, Vincent, Vanderbilt, Dorian Finney-Smith, all these guys did a bunch of stuff, but from a fantasy standpoint, they've got no shot. Clippers were bad, although I've been arguing that Derek Jones belongs on fantasy rosters, and he did nothing to disprove that in this ball game. He was good again, and we're at a point now with Jones where, what is it? It's like the last 3 weeks, I think he's been in that top 85 range. It's a low upside play, mind you, because he's not going to score a ton. He's going to be a high efficiency guy who gets you like 1 to 1.5 3-pointers, a handful of rebounds, 1 or 2 assists, stealing a block. He's a 1-1-1 guy, which is notable on good percentages. But he's never going to have these big explosion games unless a bunch of guys are resting. So we're talking about a guy who's kind of a high floor, like, top 130 floor, but also like a top 80 ceiling. So I get it if you don't want to do the Derek Jones thing because it's not that much fun, but he is startable right now. By most metrics, he's 9 categories startable. And the Blazers won again. The hottest teams in the NBA right now are the Lakers and the Blazers, probably. Isn't that crazy? The Blazers in particular have won 5 in a row and 9 of the last 10. The Grizzlies, by the way, are also quite hot. I don't want to diminish what the Grizzlies are doing right now. But that one's less surprising, I guess, than the Lakers and Blazers. That's why those jump out a little bit. Indy was bad. You can pretty much just throw this one out. Good to see Andrew Nembhard put up a decent ball game, even while his team was getting destroyed. Over on the Blazers side, I mean, they're just playing their butts off right now, and it's kind of screwing up the whole trade deadline stash thing. And not just because the stash guys aren't doing as much right now, but because the Blazers see a pathway, even if it's a near impossible one, because the Spurs in front of them, by the way, in the rankings, just picked up De'Aaron Fox. The Warriors are also in front of them. The Mavs are also in front of them. There's a lot of distance to cover, but it also kind of feels like maybe the Blazers feel like they've tanked long enough. They're obviously not making a run for the bottom. That would be almost impossible right now. Portland's won 22 ball games, and there are, I think, 7 teams that have won fewer than them. So, there's no chance for the Blazers to make a run for the bottom 3 or 4. So it's starting to look more and more like they might actually play their veterans later than expected. So I'm now kind of down on the Donovan Clingan stash. I don't think that he gets to do a ton until mid to late March. I think if you stash Clingan, you're probably going to be sitting on him for the next 5 or 6 weeks and getting very little out of him. And to me, that's too long. Jeremy Grant is and remains a sell high pretty much anytime he's healthy, but he might actually play into late March also. Still, I know he had a down ball game here. I think you can still go with Denny Avdia. He's been playing well enough anyway, and someone's going to get hurt or go down, so or get moved. I think Avdia remains an active stash. Toumani Camara, he's been very, very good lately, but that's when he's shooting the ball well. They love what he does, from a role player standpoint. But again, if the dudes are not going to get out of the way, I mean, it removes a bit of the upside that we were hoping for there. So, Avdia, he was probably my number 1 deadline stash guy. And now he becomes more of an end of season stash guy, but still a good one because he's decent enough in the meantime. Kamara is more like the world's greatest filler level guy who you could definitely just play in head-to-head the rest of the way if you wanted to. But Roto, kind of coin flip on a night-to-night basis. Scoot's a hold because they just, every 2 weeks, they trust him a little bit more. So that's good news. Simons, I think he's probably still a sell high just for, if or when he cools off. DeAndre Ayton, try to sell him when you can. Although, again, he might try to play it out a little bit more. So, the impetus to sell on these guys is a little bit less than it was 2 weeks ago. My favorite stash on the Blazers, frankly, the only one that you can call a traditional stash, is Time Lord, Robert Williams, who got a whole bunch of run in this ball game because he took one half of a back-to-back off, and Ayton had to play a crap ton of minutes the night before. So they were like, all right, Robert, get ready to play. And then Ayton got into foul trouble, so that pushed Robert Williams into a little bit more action. And this is what we're looking for. Not in Portland. That's the important note on Robert Williams. This is what we're looking for wherever he gets sent. Because there's just, to me, There's no way, even if the Blazers are trying to win games, there's absolutely no reason why they need to hang on to all three of their capable centers. They don't need all three. And they can get a bunch for Robert Williams. Someone out there is going to trade for a big man. We know the Lakers really want one, and teams are basically all like grading out what it's going to cost. Okay, do we want to go for the cheaper option like a Kelly Olynyk or a Day'Ron Sharpe, or do we want to go one rung up and pay for Robert Williams, or do we want to go another half rung up and go get Nick Claxton, or do we want to break the bank for a Miles Turner? Like there are a lot of names you want to go. Jonas Valanciunas is probably somewhere in that Robert Williams price range. I have to believe that someone offers the Blazers enough for Robert Williams. And if he goes somewhere where he's going to get 22, 23, 24 minutes, he's a great fantasy asset. He's top 75 in 24 minutes a game. So he's my favorite stash on the Blazers right now. He's jumped to the front of the line because we're so close to the deadline that you don't even have to wear any zeros between now and then. And then these other guys who were my top Blazers stashes, they've all taken a hit because the other guys on this team are probably going to play longer than we expected. It's crazy, I know, but they're winning. They're winning and they're not tanking. And so the usuals, I mean, they're going to get their days off in there, but the Jeremy Grants of the world, who we just assumed would be pretty much dead to rights, they may not be fully dead to rights. Oh, I said I was going to... I mean, this is so stupid. I don't know why I'm even doing this, but we're going to put it up on the board here for just a second. This is the trade that just went down. I am going to put it on our trade deadline tracker sheet in an interest of being thorough, but here you go. The Boston Celtics are trading Jaden Springer and their 2030 second rounder to the Houston Rockets. Both teams are also exchanging heavily protected second rounders. If you care about that, you're probably not in a redraft league because this trade means absolutely nothing to anyone. And I don't even really know how to notate it on our trade deadline tracker, which, by the way, let's throw this up on the screen now. There it is, Fantasy Basketball Trade Deadline Live Tracker. There's our YouTube page. Make sure you're subscribing to that and get ready for our show tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock a.m. Pacific time. And we're just going to list all the trades as they happen. So here's what you got so far. You got 5 trades that actually involve players who've seen time. And you guys can watch me in real time here. Let's see. How are we going to do this? Jaden Springer. Oops. Not the Ricketts. To the Rockets. There you go. It's updated. By the way, you guys can find this. I tweeted this link out, and it's going to be in the trade deadline show description once that gets going, if you guys want to happen to follow along with this live tracker. However, we are done for the morning. That is our recap show and Kyle Kuzma, Khris Middleton breakdown episode here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. As I've mentioned before, if you've made it this far, you got to subscribe to the channel. It's the biggest thing you can do for us as we continue to try to build a foundation, a subscriber base here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Lots of fun stuff in the wings, getting really cool news about actually the next basketball season, which I know we're pretty far away from. Baseball is around the corner, so make sure to subscribe so Joe Orico can get you some baseball content around here as well. I am Dan Besbris. Please, dear Lord, I know it's a hellscape, but you got to follow on social media, especially leading up to the trade deadline. It's at Dan Besbris on Twitter, Old Man Squad on the Blue Sky Network. Hit that 5-star review, hit the like button on all the shows that you can find, and we will see you guys again later on today. We're going to have a stash episode, our very last stash episode with the good fellas from the Menace Pod Men podcast. So long for now. I'm going to leave the trade deadline tracker up on the screen for a few seconds so you guys can enjoy it. Later, guys.